more months of shooting. And he looked right at me and smiled. I was close enough, and he said, "You ready to go back to work?" I said, yeah, you know. And he stepped around me and he said, "You've all been warned. Now let's get back to work." So I get back from work that night, right? And I go in, I can't find my daughter. I go upstairs, she had a room adjacent to me. And I couldn't find my script. I said, "I need the scenes to study for tomorrow." And she says, "I've made copies, there's some sides there for your scenes tomorrow." She said, "Leave me alone." She was in reading the script in the side room. So the next morning I wake up and I had a late call at 8 in the morning, right? And so I get up, I knock on her door, open the door, we have adjoining room suites, and she's not there. And I think, what the fuck? So I go downstairs to the Nico Hotel, and all our transportation people are there, and I said, "Has anyone seen Adrian? Anyone seen my daughter?" And they said, "Oh yeah, she took the first car in this morning, Mr. Ironside." And I went, what is going on? So I get up dressed, I get down to the studio, and I walk on set, and there's Paul and her sitting in side by side in chairs. They have copies of the script, and she's got a little coffee and everything like that, and they're discussing the script. And I walk in, and I'm like, what the fuck's going on here? Paul looks at me and says, "You're in early." He says, "Well, you might as well get into makeup. Well, we might get to you soon." He said, "But leave us alone. We're discussing creativity." Are you videotaping this? Oh my God. Well, I'm going to tell you the next part. Paul, it's not out of disrespect. I get back to the hotel that night, and I said to very young Adrian, I said, "Why weren't you, frightened of that man?" She says, "Dad, how can you be frightened of a man?" She says, "I know his daughter. I know the house they're leasing in Beverly Hills." And he said there was a car alarm that went off in the neighborhood, and he got really frustrated and went out in the middle of the night to tell them to shut their car alarm off. And she told me that everyone wouldn't do it. They were laughing at him because he had a full-on nightshirt and he was wearing a hat like a. And my daughter says to me, she said, "Dad, how can you be afraid of a man who sleeps in a hat?" Now, on top of that, and it being Father's Day tomorrow, I want to say something. My daughter Adrian is here with me tonight. She is a post-production in Nashville on the first film that she just co-produced, and I am super proud of her. Stand up, Adrian, please.
Woo!
Come on, stand up. Am I going to catch shit for that later? Some of my favorite memories from this show. Anyone here ever remember the film Field of Dreams?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd flown back to Los Angeles for like one day to do something, and I flew back to we shot this in Mexico City, and I got back to the Nico Hotel very late, and as I was walking in, I knew Arnold. I had seen the film earlier at a screening at the Field of Dreams, and Arnold, all his kind of buddies and stuff, his stunt double and everything, were all walking around outside the hotel like dogs off their leash. I don't mean to, but it was like, what the hell's going on here? Because they were all kind of his cronies and stuff. And I walk in, and Arnold was sitting in front of the doors in the lobby of the hotel. And he saw me coming, and he goes, Mikey, come here. And I came over, and he stood up, and he said, "I saw Field of Dreams. Have you seen it?" And I said, "Yes." And he started to cry. And he said, "What is it you never got to tell your father?" And I told him, and he told me his. And he gave me a big hug, and he said, "Now I can go to sleep." And he went to the elevators and went up to bed and stuff. Arnold will always be a friend of mine. He'll always be a friend of mine. I got close to him. There's a lot of people on this film I got very close to. I'm trying to think of something else. Look, at science fiction, I grew up. My grandfather, my dad's father, Jock Ironside, Findlay Ironside, little 5'6", could speak 6 or 7 languages. He was one of the first members of the original sci-fi group before sci-fi was allowed to be published. No, regular publishing companies wouldn't handle it. It was all those sci-fi magazines and private magazines they'd share with each other. A.J. Vaught was is it A.E. Vaught? Or A.J. He wrote the Slant series. Anyone know the Slant series? Here, I got it wrote down on a piece of paper. I read it. He gave it to me to read when I was 14. A.E. Van Vogt. It's this, you know the Slan series? You should actually look at it. It's one of the, somebody. I know the printed piece of paper is dying, but you know, and everything's done offline. But pick up books. Our mind equates information off paper different than it does off a screen. A.E. He gave me that to read. Heinlein, Robert Heinlein was a friend of his. I read Dune from a shoebox, from a boot box, when I was 12 years old. It was one of the first drafts of it. And the top page said, "Hey Jock, have a look at this, see if you can find any bugaboos. Bob." And so it was kind of in my, not genetic makeup, it was, I said to my grandfather one day, I said, for science fiction and like horror and stuff, you know, I said, this is different, I don't know this. He says, it's a way of getting political and social comments across to people and the people that need to see it, that where straight literature will not let it be published. He says it's basically political. Like Dune, I said, when I read Dune, I said, what is this? He says, it's the Middle East. He says, you know, Arrakis is the Middle East. The spice is oil, you know, and he foretold me at the age of 13 and 12 and 13, what's going on right now politically in the world has been going on for the last 15 to 20 years in the Middle East. Yeah, thank you, boys. You guys got quiet real fast. So sci-fi, I've always had a special place in my heart. Do you know what I mean? That it speaks in a general way, in a way, and it presents ideas and thoughts and political information in a format that we can read, and hopefully some of it just seeps in and gives us the idea that we have a choice, that the world is a democracy, that that art is a democracy, and it's got to be exercised. I'm really proud of you guys that you celebrate science fiction and horror and stuff like that. I don't mean to cut you out of this, but we're going to take some questions and answers. I'm going to tell you a little story before I do questions and answers. I was actually at a screening a few years ago.
Sit right here. Call me when you need me.
Sit. Have a beer. I hear they're very good. I haven't drank in 35 years, and so enjoy me. Tell me what it's like. I already know what it's like. You plotting that. What was I talking about? What was I talking about? Somebody remember?
I've had nothing to do with this.
Huh? Oh, I was at a screening a few years ago. Yes, I'm going to warn you before you take Q&A that I was at a screening for something else, and I got to the question. Somebody put up their hand. I said yes. And this guy stood up in the audience, went fifth row. If you're here, I'll fucking deal with you. And and he said, on Total Recall, I heard that you had an affair with Sharon, and he said, true or not? With Sharon Stone. And I looked at him and I said, that's why I asked about children. I said, when you wank, when you play with yourself at night, do you do it with the lights on or off? And have you ever thought about your mother when you're doing it and fuck the whole thing up? And the guy stood there and said, well, that's pretty personal. I said, exactly. And so, if anyone's thinking of like opening their questions with, they do it with the lights off, the very next guy that I took a question from, he said, lights off. And no, that he's never thought about his mother. I will tell you that my very first scene I shot in Total Recall, when we got to Mexico City, they've already been shooting for a couple of weeks, was our entrance into their apartment. The sequence for Sharon and him, and he's busted out, and I walk in, I kick the guy away from her and pick her up, and we did that scene. And I had never, the characters I play, I'd never romantically kissed anyone at that point in my career. And my wife of 4 or 5 years was standing off set, and Sharon in character, Sharon's a friend, by the way. Our kids went to the same school when they were, my youngest did when they're growing up. So I said to my wife, what do I do here? She says, go talk to Sharon, go mention it to her. So I went up to Sharon, and she's a full wardrobe and stuff, and I said, look, I want to let you know I've never romantically kissed anybody at this point in my career. And she looked right over my shoulder at my wife and said, don't worry, I'll look after it. And if you notice, there's a little tongue action in that.
Yeah.
And I think that was part of that guy's wanting to know if I'd had an affair with her. But, so, anyone got a question?
I got a question, Michael.
Lights on or lights off? Okay, your question. Beg your pardon?
What was the most fun you ever had on set?
On any set? I've done 300 fucking films. I told you, no private questions. There was this one bathroom trip in the middle of, never mind. I have no idea. When you gave me this award, I said I feel fortunate. That's the absolute truth. You know, I get paid to do what I love. I really do. You know, I've directed some, I've written some, you know, but acting allows me almost therapeutically to act out some of the stuff that was traumatic in my childhood and stuff and through my life. So they see the character, and the script is like a piece of stained glass. All I got to do is put the light under it. And I think therapeutically, I've gone back in my past to things that have happened and stuff, and just turned it on and light up the screen. And the director, by the way, the script is the piece of stained glass. The director just tells us which way around the stained glass we're going to go as a storyteller, if that makes any sense. You're writing this down, right? I'm doing this for you. I want to read it later. So the most fun, I tell you the most fun I did have. I did a film up in Canada, Vancouver, and I took it, financially we were strapped, and I took the film because of the financing. And once I had agreed to do it, they started collapsing characters into my character. And originally the story was quite good, and I can't even remember the name of it, but I got really, really upset, and I actually felt suicidal when I was doing it, because I felt I kind of cheated myself. And I called some friends and stuff like that, and I said, I don't really want to be here. And it was about 2 weeks into a 3-month shoot. I said, I feel like I've poured myself, or I've dirtied what has been so freely given to me and stuff. And the friend said, where are you sitting? I said, I was sitting in a chair in the middle of the suite of the hotel because I was afraid to go out the balcony. I'd already given back the very fast car they rented for me and all this stuff. And he talked to me, and I got in touch with it, you know, and I realized, he said, just remember this is a gift, this experience, so that you never have to do this again. You know, you never have to hurry yourself. It's getting to do what I do, I really do believe, has been a state of grace to be able to do this, what I do, for a very long time. You know, for 50 years, 49 years, I'm almost 49 years in my career, and I'm still working, you know. I've lived through cancer, 3 different bouts of cancer, 2 daughters. Yeah, you gotta applaud that one. And I'm still working, you know. Inside I'm about 25 or 26. On the outside, as you can see, it's kind of deteriorated. You know, you guys who have never been to seen movies, there are people out there who have never been to a movie theater. A few months back, somebody came up to me and said, are you related to Michael Ironside? And I said, I am Michael Ironside, you know. And the guy went, oh my God, what happened? I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, look at you. He had just watched Extreme Prejudice the night before, you know, and Walter Hill's film. And I said, that film is 27 years old. And he went, no. You know what I mean? It's insane. So I remember there was no cell phones. Yeah. Figure that one out. You know, instant gratification, you know? You actually had to walk to something and dial it. Put little coins in if you want to get in touch with somebody. Anyway, questions?
How was it like working with David Cronenberg and Scanners? That's why I became a big fan.
Do you want to know something about Scanners? And I hear it's going to be here in a couple of years on its 40th anniversary. Sure.
Yeah.
No?
Nope. Now it is. Now it has to be.
40th or 50th anniversary? Or
40th.
Something like that? 40.
40.
Yeah. It was wonderful. David's an absolute. I've done 300 films. I class maybe 5 on the level of true geniuses, and I don't throw genius around like a weak comment or something like that. Somebody who is safe, leading a tribe of people to tell a story. Paul's one of them. David's one of them. Walter Hill is one of them. There's a couple other you wouldn't know. Working with David was wonderful. Doing Scanners, to tell the truth, I was hired for one day. I was hired to do the black and white, the sequence on film when he sits down,
yeah.
and I'm in the psychiatric display and stuff like that. That's what I was hired for. And when I did the audition for that, they'd already started their first week of shooting. And David actually rewrote the project as we were going. Took the emphasis off of the characters. I never knew what I was going to be playing. I got the script the night before or sometimes in the morning going to work. And I just played the character like a Che Guevara. I played a guy that was part of a revolution in Scanners. He was just, and I left that underneath. There's actually a scene that was cut out and was shown in those days they didn't have worldwide releases. Scanners was released in Europe first. And they had a bit of a riot when it opened up, because there was a scene in mine that says, just because you made me the way I am, you don't get the right to kill me. And I was at a festival in Barcelona with it, they sent me with 2 press, like David was over in Berlin, and I won't mention some other, but they were all in the big places, right? I was like in Barcelona and stuff with a little drunk guy that was my press secretary, and another fellow who was gay, had never been anywhere where it was allowed, and he was just having a good time. And, Eric, I hope he's safe wherever he is. And I saw that London, we were supposed to fly into London and meet up, for the next festival there. And they had 2 theaters in Piccadilly Square with me doing what I'm doing in Scanners, and they were rioting out front of the theaters because people who, I don't that punk originally came because you were forced in London and England to, when you were out of work and you wanted the dole, which is welfare, you had to go to 4 job interviews a week. And if you got the job, you couldn't get welfare, you couldn't get any dole. So people would fuck themselves up so they wouldn't be hired by the companies. They would dye their hair red or shave half their hair off. And it became a movement against the establishment. And we're talking 1963, 64, 65. And when it came to Scanners, all these people there was people like out in front of the theater, the so-called punks, saying, just because you made us doesn't give you the right to kill us. And they were chanting it like a revolution. And a guy actually took a gun and shot himself in the forehead. And I went, didn't kill himself, thank God. But I thought, I am not going into London with this little short guy and this other guy who's just found out that he could do what he does. Because, so I flew home. But Scanners, again, fiction and science fiction is a political base. If you look at it with the political stuff and the political stories in it, well, you guys know. You guys know, or you wouldn't be here. Anyone else? Yes?
Here.
I beg your pardon?
Why does Paul Verhoeven dismember you?
He's not the only guy that's ever done that. I think I've been chopped up in pieces in more films than anyone in my history. You know what I mean? I remember when I was being taught as an actor, my teacher always said, less is more, but I don't think she meant it that way. Anyone else have a question? Here.
You mentioned that there's 300 films you made and there's like 5 or so people that you've worked with. What's a film that were amazing geniuses? What's a film of yours that you wish more people would pay attention to? Like not like a big cult film, but something else.
The question was for those who couldn't
Yeah, I
hear.
don't know. What film?
No.
Coverage that I wish. Can I get back to that and let it roll around in the back of my head?
Absolutely.
Actually, next question.
When you build yourself into a shaking rage, which happens in like several of your films, is there like a common place that you go to?
I'm a survivor of sexual abuse as a child, and that's not a comment on my family or my parents. And I go there, that powerlessness and that rage. I was trained for 5 years, almost 24 hours of classes a week with a wonderful method actor and teacher named Janine Manatis, who was part of the 3 people that were part of the studio. You had to get past her to get to the God, you know. And she came to Canada to have a child and stay because she thought there was more freedom for women in Canada. And she was my teacher, and I would spend years and years with her. I went in as a writer-director and came out as an actor. And she thought that all writers-directors in Canada and actors should come and get the same training so we'd have a common language as we grew up together in the industry. And I found it was I'm told it was very therapeutic for me, that I could pull up some of these demons from my childhood and my past and use them. I've actually talked to directors and producers that might have giving me a lead. There's a couple of films I won't mention, but because I don't want to disparage the lead actors and stuff, but they offered me the lead, and I said, no, I'd rather play the other guy. And they say, why? Because I was afraid. I was afraid to play somebody who was healthy. I was afraid to play somebody who was balanced, or who was loved, or could give love back and stuff like that. And I knew I could, right up until, I'll tell you on this film, on Total Recall, climbing up to get in the rig where my arms get cut off was a second unit shot. Just the couple of the wide shots going up. And Vic Armstrong, who did the second unit and the stunt coordinator on this, incredible guy, who I trusted dearly. I was getting on the way up this was the last film I did. I've had both my knees replaced. I've had my shoulder surgery. I've had broken my back 3-4 times. I had 17 major surgeries in the last 21 years. You know, and I'm not bragging. I'm really grateful to be standing here. That I was going up the ladder to get into the rig on the elevator, and my leg gave out. And Vic said, "Are you all right?" And I said, "Yeah, I can do it. I can do it." I said, "I'm okay." And I got up and I got into the thing with my arms behind my back. And I was so preoccupied, by the way, with the pain in my leg, I forgot to put my earplugs in. And they had 6 different power caps in my arms on either side, so that when that thing cuts my arms off, it explodes, so there will be separation from the artificial arms and stuff. So when you see me screaming, I realized as we got to the top of the elevator, I didn't have any ear protection for the explosion, so I screamed to close my ear canals, and that's the shot that's in the film. But anyway, when the shot was over, Vic took me aside and he said, "What was going on going up the stairs to get in? You seem to have a bit of a reaction." And I said, "Vic, I can't roof anymore." Now, I grew up, and through my teenage years, I cleaned factories at night, and I was a roofer on the weekends for my brother-in-law's, later to be my brother-in-law's company, and going up and down ladders and up and down ladders. And I figured if they ever found out who I really was and sent me home, I could always go back to roofing. I swear to God. And on that set, I said to Vic, I can't roof anymore. And he said, "Well, let's have dinner tonight." And at dinner, he explained to me, he said, "Do you realize that you're co-starring in a film with one of the largest stars in the world, right? You've done this number of features before. You know, you're this and this and this." And he went through that he'd gone through my whole resume because he knew me. And he said, "You've had this amount of training and you've done all this." And that was the first time I realized that nobody was going to find out who I really was and send me home, was on that set. And that's one of the reasons why this film is so special to me. And I made so many friends on this film. I'll be forever indebted for Vic Armstrong to have the privacy and the patience to kind of introduce me to who I was, not who I remember being or who I was afraid of being. Does that make sense? Yeah.